There's one.
The bass are biting in Texas. These days, almost anyone can land a lunker on a public lake. But how did all those fish get there in the first place? Most Texas reservoirs are man-made, created in recent times to control flooding and provide power and water. But what works for industry doesn't necessarily work for fish. Most fish in Texas evolved in streams, so big basins like this pose a challenge to fisheries managers. Fortunately for anglers, there are ways to build a fish-friendly reservoir, and some of the best were built in East Texas by the Sabine River Authority.
The Sabine River Authority doesn't only just supply water to people who need it or electricity for people who need it. They've joined in a partnership with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to create habitat and maintain it in our public water systems for all recreational anglers to benefit from.
The authority manages the Sabine River Basin, which stretches more than 500 miles from North Texas to the Gulf of Mexico. Established in 1949, the SRA has developed 3 major reservoirs along the river. Lake Tawakoni, completed in 1960, Toledo Bend, completed in '69, and Lake Fork, completed in the early '80s. The fishing is outstanding on each of these lakes, and that's not by accident.
They do care about the fishery. I think their actions certainly show that.
Especially on Lake Fork, where careful planning has paid off in a big way.
Another nice Lake Fork bass.
Lake Fork is probably the preeminent bass fishery in the United States. You cannot go anywhere in this country, the fishermen have not heard of Lake Fork and do not consider Lake Fork as the top big bass producer.
On any given cast, an angler has the opportunity to land a fish of a lifetime, if not the state record.
In fact, the current state record largemouth bass did come from Fork, and the lake has produced more lunkers weighing over 15 pounds than all other Texas reservoirs combined.
It's an absolutely amazing story. And you look at that top 50 list of those fish, and it's still, after all these years, the 35 of those top 50 largemouth in the state have come out of this reservoir.
And the Sabine River Authority deserves much of the credit for that. Acting on advice from Texas Parks and Wildlife, they filled the lake in stages over several years, allowing fish populations to get started in small farm ponds. They also left most of the vegetation intact, providing valuable habitat for bass.
Prior to Lake Fork, when lakes were built, they would go through and just bulldoze the bottom. And this one, they kept the timber, and that gave it a jump start like no other lake in the history of the state's ever had.
Creating a world-class fishery is one thing. Now the challenge is to keep it that way.
We have an extensive water quality monitoring program throughout the entire basin. We have monthly sampling routines that we do from Lake Tawakoni all the way to the Gulf Coast. And we believe that this not only enhances the fisheries industry, but it also helps the general public that utilize and drink the water out of our water supply reservoirs.
Getting anglers on the water is another thing the authority does well. They've built public boat ramps throughout the basin, providing easy access to the river and lakes. They also maintain markers on boat lanes to guide boaters around submerged timber and other hazards.
Many of our employees enjoy using the resource themselves. They like to fish, and so it has a personal dimension to them, as well as a professional dimension of pride in being a part of the group that's helping to make this happen. And I think we're going to see in the future expanded efforts to continue to make a good program better. We see this as a great challenge, and we see it as a great opportunity, and we see it as something that's going to be a part of our ongoing mission.